Welcome back to the final session of today's Colloquium, and it's my great pleasure to introduce the first speaker in our session D, Dr. Richard Zettler from the University of Pennsylvania. I'm particularly thrilled that he's here because there was a moment when it looked as if he might have to attend an academic meeting, but we won out. So grateful very much that you could join us. And he will talk to us today about brought-in collections from sites in Ur's Hinterlands. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm very happy to be here today. I vowed that the paper I gave at the 62nd rencontre, or in the 21st century, held in Philadelphia in 2016, would be the last word I had to say about Woolley's excavations at Tel el-Mughayr. However, the 100th anniversary of the beginning of Woolley's epic excavations, and I have a date of November the 2nd for the start of those in 1922, is too historic an occasion to let pass in silence. So I'm here yet again. However, rather than talk about Woolley's excavations at Ur, I thought it might be of more than passing interest to focus on the collections Woolley amassed during his excavations from archaeological sites in close proximity to Tel el-Mughayr. As you probably know, Woolley used more than 20,000 field registration numbers, 1 to 5 digit numbers with a U prefix, to catalog the objects he uncovered in his 12 years of excavations. Many, if not most, of these field registration numbers included multiple objects. For example, U18447 included 23 objects from a clay coffin. And I cannot even begin to estimate how many objects Woolley accessioned over the period of 1922 to 1934. In any case, if we add to that total the very large number of objects to which Woolley never assigned field numbers, we can probably double or triple the number of objects that came from his excavations. Woolley exported so many small objects that the British Museum literally gave many of them away to museums around the world that merely expressed an interest in acquiring objects from Ur. The Nicholson Museum at the University of Sydney in Australia, now closed, I understand, acquired a small collection, 50 or so objects from Ur that the British Museum provided in 1926. Most of the objects Woolley assigned U numbers to which Woolley assigned U numbers were from his excavations at Tel el-Mughayr, but several thousand at least were from nearby archaeological sites, and you can find a list of these sites at our database or online. 2,000 or so were from Dik-Dika, low mounds to the north and northeast of Ur's fortified center. Workmen or their children collected the majority of objects from these sites and gave them to Woolley in exchange for token compensation or bakshish. And you see in these two slides pictures of Woolley recording the finds that his workmen brought in. Woolley invariably cataloged them with the fine spot brought in from such and such a site, hence the title of my paper. Here is Woolley's sketch map of the district of Ur from UE4, showing the location of some of the sites in the vicinity of Ur's fortified core. And here is an alphabetical list of sites with the site catalog numbers from Henry Wright's Eridu Ur survey, where known. Henry Wright, as you probably know, published his surveys around Ur as an appendix to Robert McCormick Adams's Heartland of Cities. The largest number of objects brought in, 2,000 or so, came from Dik-Dika, a chain of low mounds, occasionally cultivated, approximately 2 kilometers northeast of the ziggurat between the main railway line and the branch line to Nasiriyah, as then laid out. And you will find Woolley's comments on this in both the Antiquities Journal and in UE7. The name Dikdika, as Woolley tells us, is apparently a term used for stone ballast or gravel in a stony country. In Woolley's first season, 1922 to 23, workers coming from villages in the cultivated plain east of Ur or from camps on the modern canal bank walked across the site, picked up surface finds, most commonly terracotta figurines and plaques, and gave them to Woolley, who compensated them for the finds. At the time, the location did not have a fixed name, and the first season's catalog cards often say from near the railway or near Munshid's water engine. In the second season, Woolley decided to investigate Dikdika more systematically, deploying 100 or so workmen on the site. But after 2 days of excavations, he decided the architectural remains were insufficient to reward further work. Instead, he let workers pick up objects over the next 10 seasons, and most later catalog cards state brought in Dikdika or just Dikdika. In the fifth season, 1926-27, a workman that Woolley had dismissed, who was trying to earn money by independent digging, came in to report that he had come on baked brick building in the flat ground, but close to the northwest mound. Woolley put Max Mallowan on the site, and he cleared the northwestern end of the so-called treasury of Sin Iduna. Woolley provided a detailed description of Dikdika and a thorough review of the chronology of settlement at the site in the Woolley and Mallowan, the Old Babylonian period, UE7. He indicated that occupation in the northeastern suburbs had begun in the time of the Third Dynasty of Ur and continued through the Neo-Babylonian and Achaemenid Persian periods. I cannot really add much to what Woolley had to say, though I would make a couple of observations about finds from the site. Many royal inscriptions come from Dikdika. These include numerous clay cones referring to the return of Magan's ships to Kisara, and recording Urnama's digging of various canals. A fragmentary brick stamp with Shulgi's standard inscription, and stamped bricks recording the king's construction of a Hursag. Stamped bricks with Amar Sin's standard inscription, and a stamped brick recording Amar Sin's construction of the so-called Watchtower of Ur. But in addition to these royal inscriptions, a couple of dozen Ur-3 economic texts were found on the surface of Dikdika. A small private archive of a certain Luma includes 13 texts dating from Amar Sin 6 to Ibi Sin 5, recording his interest-bearing loans of as much as 1 mana of silver to various borrowers. Magnus Wedell published the loans, but noted only that the tablets had been found in the cemetery of the city. Inasmuch as they document seemingly private economic activities, the Luma dossier, like so many of the Ur-3 texts from Nippur, stand out from the bulk of the Ur-3 administrative economic records that derive from institutional contexts. I might also call your attention to another seemingly private economic record, U2733, or British Museum 130109, and a braided tablet recording the sale of date palms in the orchard of Ur-Dingira, son of Dugazida, to Ur-Lama for 4 shekels of silver. The sale is dated Ibisin year 6. In his review of the chronology of settlement at Dikdika in Woolley and Mallowan, the Old Babylonian period, UE7, Woolley noted that the evidence of the cylinder seals from Dikdika accords perfectly with the conclusions he reached largely on the basis of inscribed finds. In 2006, Justin Bracken, then a Penn senior majoring in anthropology, created an Excel spreadsheet of all the finds from Dictica that Woolley had cataloged as part of his senior honors thesis on Dictica. Bracken's spreadsheet included 213 cylinder seals and 11 stamp seals. A little less than half, 99 of 213 of the cylinder seals, date to the time of the Third Dynasty of Ur. 8 or so are so-called post-Akkad or early Ur III, and 5 are probably Ur III seals recut in the following Isin-Larsa period. Though the bulk of the seals are Ur III in date, a dozen or so cylinder seals from Dictica date to the end of the second or early first millennium. While U18284, and this is Penn Museum 3335-170, is a typical Neo-Babylonian or Achaemenid Persian Chalcedony stamp seal with worshippers on each side of standards. The large number of frit or glazed frit, most often glazed frit, amulets from Dictica, Pazuzu heads, frogs, tortoises, and fish, perhaps also date to this late occupation of the site. Now we'll move on to another site called Rajaba. Woolley accession finds brought in from Rajaba under 81 field registration numbers, with a dozen or so finds from the second season of excavations under Tel al-Ubaid field numbers. He located Rajaba and its variant names 9 to 10 kilometers south-southwest of Ur. It would appear to be a complex of 3 distinct mounds that Henry Wright listed in his catalog of sites as 4 Rajaba al-Janub, 5 Rajaba al-Shamal, and an unnamed site 93. Wright estimated that Rajab al-Janub was 8.2 hectares in the Jemdet Nasser to early dynastic period and 3 hectares in the late Larsa era. He described Rajab al-Shamal as possibly having late Ubaid and Uruk occupations and being 12 hectares in the Jemdet Nasser period with a trace of late occupation dating to the late Larsa era. Wright estimated Site 93 as being 2.5 hectares in the Jemdet Nasser early dynastic periods and the same size in the post-Kassite era. Woolley described Rajab as predominantly at least of the date of the Third Dynasty of Ur. Though Woolley did not spell out his reasoning for the date, he recorded a pivot stone, U6336, with an inscription commemorating Ur-Namma's construction of a temple for the goddess Ninsun. Peter Steinkeller used this pivot stone as a primary source for identifying Rejaba as Kuwara, ancient Kuwara. I would add that several pottery vessels with Tel al-Ubaid field registration numbers were noted as being found with or close by Amar Sin bricks, presumably meaning bricks with Amar Sin's standard inscription, though none of the bricks apparently made it into Woolley's field catalog. At least one of the pottery jars that you see here, this is Tel al-Ubaid 448, a jar with a ridged shoulder, can be dated to the late 3rd millennium BCE without any hesitation. Though Wright noted early occupation at Rejaba, Woolley accessioned only 3 early objects from the site. 2 zoomorphic pendants or amulets dating to the Jemdet Nasser or early dynastic 1 periods, and a stone stamp seal, TO442, pyramidal in shape and engraved with the face of a bearded human-headed bull, probably early dynastic 3. Except for, and here is his catalog card with a fairly rudimentary drawing of the head engraved on it. So except for the pivot stone with Ur-Namma's inscriptions, all the remaining finds from Rejaba date to the very late 2nd and early 1st millennium BCE, and presumably were from the surface of Wright's Site 93 with its post-Kassite remains. These include the following: 4 Neo-Babylonian tablets, 1 complete and 3 fragmentary. The complete tablet in Penn Museum is a Neo-Babylonian legal text recording a loan. 10 cylinder seals, including several that Dominique circled here, that Dominique Colon or Donald Matthews assigned to the 3rd Kassite group or 2nd Isin group. And 1 cylinder seal. I apologize for the quality of this slide. I'm not a very good photographer with my cell phone. One that Dominique Colon published as Late Babylonian, dating to the 8th or 7th centuries. Woolley also registered 2 copper alloy figurines of a seated dog. These figurines are generally dated to the Kassite or post-Kassite eras. Here is a copper alloy bowl, U18364, with pouring spout and handle grip in the form of a lion head. The lion's head gripping the bowl's rim calls to mind the so-called lion bowls found in North Syria and at Hassanlu in northwestern Iran. Woolley noted that nothing similar was found at Ur and suggested a date in the Achaemenid Persian period. In addition, let me come back, Woolley registered an undecorated copper alloy beaker or situla or beaker found in a clay coffin with an iron dagger, iron bangles, copper alloy and iron bracelets, copper and iron rings, copper and iron arrowheads, and stone and paste beads. He also registered an undecorated copper alloy situla or beaker with a nipple base, found with or brought in with an iron sword blade and copper alloy arrowheads. Oscar Muscarella has dated comparable undecorated beakers to sometime between the 9th and 7th to 6th centuries BCE. While Dictica and Regiba yielded the bulk of the objects Woolley's workmen brought in, 2 smaller sites, Regiba X and Merigib, apparently a name used commonly for a ruined mound, provided predominantly early finds. Woolley located Regiba X, initially confused with Regiba, approximately 19 kilometers northwest of Ur. Wright identified his survey site 98 as likely Woolley's Regiba X. He described the site as having a terminal Ubaid occupation and covering approximately 1 hectare, with a looted tomb dated to the Ur III or early Larsa period. The site also yielded a copper pen, stone celts and hose, steatite pallets, a jasper ear stud, and decorated steatite spindle whorl, all presumably dating to the Ubaid period. Woolley published some of these finds in his Ur the Early Periods, UE4. Merigib lay approximately 16 kilometers south of Ur, west of the railway line. Woolley described it as a small mound, and I'm quoting, a small mound composed of very hard material resembling decomposed gypsum, which is overlaid and the pockets in it filled by drift sand. It now rises, he noted, to a height of about 2 meters above the modern plain level and was once higher. He dated the Merigib's occupation to the Ubaid, Uruk, and Jemdet Nasser period. Henry Wright recorded a number of sites with the name Merigib. He suggested that Woolley's Merigib is his survey site 29. Wright described it as having an Ubaid occupation, Uruk and Jemdet Nasser early dynastic 1 occupations, covering about 1.5 hectares and 1 hectare respectively. He also noted that Merigib continued to be occupied in Kassite and post-Kassite periods perhaps covering as much as 2 hectares. Since Woolley was involved at the time in excavating the earlier phase of Woolley's occupation, he asked for a permit to excavate the site. I think he addressed his original request to Sidney Smith, and Julius Jordan actually replied with the permit. And he worked briefly at the site in his 8th 1929 to 30 field season. Woolley accessioned a ground stone celt from the site, 6 diorite bowls and goblets, a sherd of an alabaster vessel with 2 lines of an archaic dedicatory inscription, an old Babylonian terracotta plaque with a pair of females in high relief, and a Frit Pazuzu head that the British Museum Collections database at least places in the 15th to 12th centuries BCE. In addition, Woolley noted the presence on the site of a few loose bricks with Amar Sin's standard inscription and double jar burials dating doubtless to Wright's Kassite or more likely to his post-Kassite occupation. I do not have time here to talk about all of the sites in Woolley's Ur's hinterlands from which Woolley amassed objects, but I do want to mention one more site, and that is a site called Dahelia, located approximately 25 kilometers west-northwest of Ur. Dahelia is Henry Wright's Tel al-Dahelia, his site survey 148, as he admits, though I understand that Russian excavators are working at a site they also identified as Tel Dahelia. Wright noted a concentration of ceramic slab on the western extremity of the site, possibly Ubaid and late Larsa occupations, but he dated the main occupation to the Neo-Babylonian and later eras, when it covered approximately 15 hectares by his estimate. Woolley's workers brought in 2 cylinder seals, a white limestone seal depicting 2 winged demons before a palm, and U20047, an amethyst quartz seal with a kneeling man grasping a gazelle. In addition, Woolley accessioned 2 terracotta Pazuzu masks, a Pazuzu head in frit, and 1 in lapis paste, whatever that may be, maybe the lapis lazuli-like glass, with a larger collection of beads. A broken copper alloy fibula, an iron dagger and 2 swords, and a large collection of copper alloy and iron arrowheads. Woolley described the copper alloy arrowheads as being the 3-flange type, in other words, what I would interpret as trilobate arrowheads, that did not appear before the 7th century BCE, at least according to the various scholars who have worked on the problem of the date of these trilobate arrowheads. A terracotta figurine, which you see here, and a green glazed pottery bowl round out the finds from Dahelia. The figurine, and this is U20046, depicts a bearded male facing forward, wearing a long garment with a broad belt and holding a flask at his chest. It dates, and I take this date from Evelyn Klingelbrandt's Die Terrakotten von Babylon, to the Neo-Babylonian era. The bowl, U20054, has a beveled clubbed rim, a type that is common in the post-Kassite or early Neo-Babylonian era, though I am a little concerned about the green glaze on it. Of the other sites in Ur's hinterland, only Abu Kimba and its variants, Abu Kimbaran, Abu Kimban, and Busoher contributed a significant number of finds to Woolley's field register. Busoher, near a site called Tel Halawiya, on the east bank of the Euphrates near Nasiriyah, was apparently a Ludit Jemdit Nasser to early dynastic cemetery. It yielded a large number of stone bowls, most of which Woolley included in UE4. Abu Kimba, west of Nasiriyah, and you can see it here on the map, was apparently an Old Babylonian site. It yielded a fragment of an Old Babylonian letter and a number of incredibly uninteresting terracotta plaques, such as the one that I have shown here. Oh, let me go back. Since our schedule has Walter Zollerberger and Dominique Charpin following me, I provide something for them. So I will end with a site called Birket, located near Kidder between Samawa and Nasiriyah. Woolley reported only one object, U6052, a white limestone plaque apparently in the Iraq Museum, with a much weathered inscription on one side. The inscription is yet another exemplar of Doug Frayn's The Old Babylonian Period, RIME4, number E4464, recording Anam's construction of a wall of Uruk, but oddly, one exemplar that Frayne did not include in RIME4. So with that, I will thank you all for your attention and leave you with this photograph of Sir Leonard Woolley, cigarette in hand as usual, and many of his note cards have cigarette burns on them, and my late colleague Robert H. Dyson Jr. On Woolley's last visit to Philadelphia in 1955 to accept the Lucy Drexel Wharton Medal, established in the late 19th century to honor, and I quote, exceptional achievement in excavation or the publication of archaeological work. And I think we can all agree today that Sir Leonard Woolley very richly deserved the medal on both counts. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that, extraordinary lecture, which widened out our exploration of Woolley's work at Ur into that hinterland, really revealing the extraordinary range of material that was generated from it. I think we've probably got a little time. If anybody would like to put a question in the Q&A, if anyone has anything they'd like to ask Dr. Zettler. No one's rushing in, I think.
Whether he can answer it is another question.
In which case, I think we probably will just take the opportunity to thank you again very much indeed. And I'm glad you were able to contribute to our
I'm glad I missed the meeting that I was supposed to go to at the university. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.